When photographing grand buildings like this, often the best approach is to stand back and zoom in a bit in order to keep the geometry nice and square. You want it to look just as the architect intended it to. But in some situations, well, things get in the way. Here we've got buildings on both sides, we've got plants, lots of people hanging around, and it's just getting in the way of a clear view of the main building itself. So we're going to have to try a different approach. So I've now moved closer to the building to avoid the obstructions on either side, but I'm obviously now pretty close to it and I can't fit in anywhere near as much as I want to with the normal lens. So I'm going to go for the ultra wide option to be able to capture the pillars. And because I'm pointing upwards now, I'm in an ultra wide, I'm just going to embrace the distortion. I like the way that these pillars are both pointing in. So now it's a case of just moving the camera around and from side to side to make sure you include all the elements that you want and to try and get it as symmetrical as possible. And it's looking pretty good, so now it's just a case of framing the shot so everything is where you want it. I really want the name of the building here, the town hall at the top, so I'm going to make sure that that is visible. But I also want to make sure that the gaps in between are as symmetrical as possible. And in order to do this, I've been deliberately standing right in front of the building, but for some odd reason, I still can't get it absolutely square. Even though I am absolutely slap bang in the middle of the frame, I'm stood right in front of it. And that is because most phones have got their cameras on the side, not in the middle. So what you want to make sure is that the cameras are directly in front and in the middle. And what that might involve doing is just shifting the phone from side to side a bit until you can see that view is completely symmetrical. And then when everything is lined up the way you want it, you can take your shot. I'd also recommend taking lots of different pictures in slightly different angles because you'll notice that some will work out better than others. And it also maximizes your chances of getting one that's as symmetrical as possible. Right, now let's have a review of the photos and see which look best. Here I'm positioned far enough away from the building that there's minimal distortion. I've fitted it all in and the building itself looks fine. But unfortunately, the actual square itself has meant that I'm a bit to the side, so I'm a bit angled onto it. And worse, I've got these obstacles in front, the buildings on the left and right, these giant plant pots. It's spoiled the picture, so I'm going to have to go closer to this in order to get a clear view. For this shot, I'm much closer to the building and I've used an ultra-wide lens on the phone in order to fit in the pillars. And I've really embraced the distortion here, pointing upwards. They're really angling in, but it gives it some nice drama. However, I've not been very careful with the actual angle of the phone, and you can see that while the pillars look fine, the lines at the top are not parallel to the top of the frame. They're sloping down to the side. And actually looking a little bit closer, you'll see that there's different amounts of wall visible. It's not symmetrical, it's a messy picture, but it is very easy to correct by just taking a bit more care. In this shot, I'm close to the building, I'm using the ultra-wide lens to fit it all in, but I've been very careful about how I've framed it. And that involves, with an ultra-wide lens, just angling the camera by tiny amounts, and it can actually make a very big difference. So I've kept an eye on the top lines and made sure that they're parallel to the top of the frame. I've kept an eye on how much wall is visible on both sides to try and get it as even and equal as possible. We want symmetry here. And one of the biggest things that I needed to do here was to make sure that it was the camera on the phone, not myself, that was dead center. And because the cameras on most phones are actually to the side of the screen, that involved just moving the phone over to one side just a little bit. So the key is to take lots of pictures, just moving the phone very slightly between each one to maximize your success. And this is the one I post.